Oh, it's spooky season. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Avero Advisors live cast. Joining me today, I have one of our distinguished project managers, Mr. Tyler Gallant. Hi, Tyler. And then, of course, you guys know AV. So today, keeping with the spirit of Halloween, we're here to share the tales from the crypt. ERP zombies and real life stories of ERP implementations that felt like they belong in the ERP graveyard, if you will. But fear not, our session isn't just about ERP horrors. We'll also explore how to conquer the business beasts lurking in the shadows. So, without further ado, if you're joining us today, please comment and tell us where you're joining from, and feel free to jump in and ask questions. We love it when you guys ask questions. So, to kick it off today, I'm going to start with the ERP graveyard. So, have either of you ever encountered an ERP implementation that felt like it belonged in the graveyard, if you will? What spooky lessons did you learn from that?
I don't think we expected any of these, but we have so many spooky stories of projects in the graveyard. And they're not completely dead. So they're kind of zombie projects, right? Undead. They're on hold for some reason or the other, out of our control. And we are just waiting and praying to cure these zombies and for them to become real projects again. And I don't know, it's not Tyler, but he's been on some zombie projects like I have. Um, and before he starts talking, I want to say a little bit about Tyler. He's one of our premier project managers, handles pretty large scale IT strategic plans and ERP implementations for cities and counties and all kinds of government agencies across the country. And he's not a chump. So yeah, here we are talking about zombie projects that we've both been part of. So Tyler, what's been your experience?
Yeah, and happy to be here. Thanks for having me on. Hey, everyone who's watching and listening today. Um, so a lot of times when we come in and we're brought in as the consulting firm, we're here to dig them out of the grave in some ways. They've gone through an implementation, and for one reason or another, it was thrown off and it was not successful. So now we're here to kind of pick up the pieces, not necessarily point fingers and figure out who's to blame for why it went off the rails, but just to rally the troops and get that momentum building again. And so a few that I've been a part of, it's been varying reasons for why they have gone off the rails. For one of them, it's budgetary constraint. It's funding that was allocated to that project had to, in an emergency, need to be allocated elsewhere. So that was one of the issues. Another one, and this is a pretty big one, is a change in leadership. Depending on who your director level staff is, who's going to be the project sponsor for that implementation. I mean, they need to be really rooted in the organization and have a good understanding of who will be the point person for each area on their team. And so, that's been a pretty common one, is that person, that position becomes vacant, and then, we can't really push the ERP forward.
Yeah, and it's unforeseen things, right? I mean, it's some of those, to an outsider, might sound like, well, you didn't control it, you didn't control the communication, you didn't control the budget. And we've had these conversations internally when a project stalls or goes into zombie stage. Immediately, we're like, what could we have done better? And these are tales of projects that were sadly beyond our control. Leadership change is a huge element of what we do, right? We focus on governments, and every 4 years, leaders change. Every 8 years, leaders change. And when the elected officials change, depending on what city or county or office you're in, you're going to change your direct reports, your directors, and priorities change. So we've been part of those sort of decisions where, again, could we have done anything better when you lose your sponsorship team that's driving this project through? Now it's a zombie. The organization needs it. The leadership has other agendas. So it's not quite dead, but it's in the background saying we're going to transfer the funding to the to the next fiscal year and see what happens. But it puts us in a bad spot because we're there to drive change through, and here we are with a 1-year break.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And definitely the leadership side is huge. If you have a mayor or city manager in place that is really in touch with, its directors and its departments, it knows why that ERP implementation is so critical. It's going to advocate for that. But if that position is suddenly changed and the new person coming in is tasked with, let's strike costs, we don't see why we need to invest millions of dollars into this, and then they derail it, and then what they don't know is ultimately over the years that they might as well. I mean, they're paying for it, for not going through with the implementation.
Yeah.
So once a project like that has derailed, if you will, what are some of the things that we do as a third party to get that project back on track, or to try to enlighten them on bringing the vision back to life?
I think keeping in communication with the client. Again, if there's leadership change, you're starting all over again.
Sure.
But if there's unforeseen circumstances like the vendor lying on their proposal, right? You could have done everything right, but if you're getting sold vaporware and the client made the bold decision to pull the plug and not go through with the project, now everyone's in a bad spot, right? You're trying not to go to litigation over this project. Someone's mic is echoing. Is it me?
I don't hear it. It might be you.
Anyway, let me try to change. Let's see if that's better. Is that better?
Yeah, you sound good.
A little bit.
If the vendor lied on their proposal and the project had to be halted, rightfully so, right? Because the client had two bad choices. One is pull the plug and look bad in front of their council and board. Two is to keep going with the project and accept an inferior bad product. I mean, in this case, in this particular zombie, it was with a council of governments, and the vendor lies, and the client had picked this vendor because they said they could do this one particular thing really well. What was taking the client about 4 steps to do a certain process on Excel, these guys were promising to automate it. Turns out they couldn't do it. They had to take 17 steps and create more spreadsheets to get this process done with the new system. So the organization made the bold decision of pulling the plug and saying, we're not going to put up with this. So of course, lawsuits were threatened and all kinds of liquidated damages were asked for. In the end, it ended up being a zombie project because the need still exists. But 2 years later, they're trying to figure out what the next best thing to do is. So what do? We've stayed in touch with them. We've stayed in touch with them and told them about all of what's going on in the industry, how they're not alone in being treated like this by this particular vendor, and we're here to jump in and help whenever they have the funding lined up, the political capital lined up to take this on again. Because again, in that particular instance, not only did the vendor fail the client, but they also had leadership change. Now with new leadership come new expectations, new initiatives, new priorities, and new relationships, right?
Yeah.
They're bringing their own preferred consultants. They're bringing their own preferred software, or at least thinking about it. So it adds to the mix. And to our team's credit, we've stayed in touch with the sponsor along the way, making sure that we're offering help and assistance wherever they need, whether we're under contract or not. That's goes back to our core value of caring for our client, and I think we show it every day.
Vendors can sometimes feel like vampires, right? So along those same lines, how can organizations negotiate with these vampires, if you will, to get the best support and not end up in a situation like this client of ours?
Take that, Tyler.
Yeah. Well, in one instance, we had significant delays in an ERP implementation because our vendor oversold to our client. We helped our client come up with very, very specific requirements for what they needed, and the vendor, got them into this contract where they had multiple modules that they didn't actually need, and so instead of the vendor being flexible and help and being open to changing that, it became a battle over several months to try to get them to change their minds and fix that. And that hurts the faith in the vendor. The client now sees the vendor as, okay, you don't really have our best interests in mind, and so that hurts every part of the implementation.
And that's post negotiation too. This is what I mean by, a lot of times we go in and say, show us what you have, not vaporware. Don't tell me what's coming next year and ask me to sign a contract today, because more often than not, it doesn't show up. Right. But we can give our best advice to the clients, but they still insist on moving forward with a particular vendor or a contract clause after our best advice. Then stuff like this happens. So zombies or ERP zombies are self-inflicted at times in this case.
Right. Can you all discuss common reasons? I mean, I know we've talked about change of leadership or budget constraints. Are there any other common reasons, or maybe tales that that hey, this project is about to derail? Is there something that we can look for to avoid the failed implementation?
Gosh, so many things. I mean, in one of our city clients up north, it was a very top-down dictated implementation. Right? It's like, we're gonna change today. Avero, do what you have to do. Here's money. And when we showed up to kick off an ERP implementation, nobody had an idea what we were doing. We had sent emails, by the way, done all of the stuff we were supposed to do to the project sponsor, and they were supposed to, manage their own crew and staff and have people ready. Our team shows up on site and no one's ready. They're asking us, what are we doing here? Why don't I have a new computer yet? Right? It was that much miscommunication. So Tyler led that effort, and he kind of pulled it out of the hat by actually bringing people together. Tyler, talk about how you encountered that and how you got out of it.
Yeah. So like you said, I mean, we showed up day one, and they were not. They did not share the understanding that the executive team did, that this was something that was going to be moving forward. So I take pride in our team being able to reach out to them and work with them to move through a lot of the work that we need to do on the front end to prepare for this implementation. But ultimately, the people, when we're talking ERP, it's financials is the most critical department. They need to be all in. Otherwise, that's going to continue to be the roadblock. And unfortunately, that's where we, continue to see the most difficulty.
Yeah.
Well, not just that. I think communication across the board, right? The why of this project, what's it going to get us to? And I think we also had a not maybe outwardly hostile, but not completely on board CIO there, right? The mayor's office is saying, I don't care what the CIO is here to do the day-to-days. You guys push us to the future, help us with change management. All of the right words were being used, and we didn't have quite the ground support, right? Or conflicting messages were being sent to people by the person that's on site responsible for the day-to-days. So we were on site. I mean, we Tyler, your team did a great job in navigating this. It still didn't help that it became a little bit of a zombie. I know it's not quite there, but getting feedback from the clients and getting them to understand that their inputs are so critical for the success of this is like one of the biggest reasons why these projects turn into zombies. Because you take it to a certain extent and ask people for feedback on a 2,000 line item requirements definition, and they're like, why are we doing this? I thought we were buying a new system. Yeah, this is part of that same project. Pay attention. And now you have a 3-week, 4-week delay in getting feedback, asking questions that should have been answered 4 weeks ago. Um, and again, this is after we've made our best efforts in making sure that we follow um, process that has worked for us for decades. Um,
Yeah.
projects
So
still
it's
turn into zombies.
yeah, it's that buy-in. That buy-in is just so critical. I mean, it will eventually derail if everyone is not bought in, and we can only do so much. You know,
Yeah.
we don't want to we don't want to put anyone in hostage situations by going through this process. We want this to be a a positive experience for everyone. It ultimately always ends up most of the time always ends up a very positive change. But we need to we need everyone to be on the same bus.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we have a viewer comment, not a question. Expectation setting and alignment along with key design decisions is lock locking is so essential to avoid nightmares. Yeah.
Yep.
Expectation setting and alignment. And again, we thought we did it with the executive team, right? We can't be expected to do that with 2,000 people before kickoff. Like someone has
Mhm.
to say, here's what's going on and here's how we are going to engage these people, and then we take over. But that critical handoff didn't happen in that one particular instance. Um, you also have projects where you're doing one phase of it with certain departments, and it's going gangbusters, it's going great. And next phase is the one department that doesn't want to open up, doesn't want to tell you any of their secrets, doesn't want to give up data or process information, and they're like, "We'll do it. We'll just do the implement. We don't need you guys poking around." That one looks, it looks bad on them because they're not letting consultants come in and help them. And two, it's obviously led to a zombie project in another client. It's the housing agency where, a major chunk of the property management applications were implemented. And when it came to the core financials, the the CFO put his foot down and said, "Nope, we're going to do this in house. In fact, we're going to bring in a CPA firm that will help us with with a financial ERP implementation." Obviously, hasn't gone well. That project's a zombie, and we're hoping it comes back to life one day.
Yeah, and in an example like that, I mean, I think we see a lot of that resistance because our clients don't understand in some cases what the purpose of implementing this ERP system is, and that it's optimizing processes that before have been very antiquated, very paper based, but they're used to it, right? They're
Mhm.
familiar with doing
It
it that way.
works.
And so, yeah, they see this as a threat. They see this as we're coming in and changing things. And now, the responsibility that they do, and every week takes them, many hours to run payroll, for instance. Now that's all going to be, it's going to be in an instant. So now what am I going to do with my time? I guess this organization doesn't need me, and that's never the outcome. It's just finding new and better ways to fill that time.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
let's
that's
go ahead.
sorry. That's part of that is on us, right? Change how effectively do we keep banging this message
Hmm.
across the board? And what are we doing in terms of change management, an often used term, to educate clients and keep them interested? This is a long cycle, right? You're doing this for anywhere from a year to 2 years, depending on your size and how complex your processes are. And it's on us to make sure that we're putting our best foot forward in terms of change management. But you're right, everyone needs to chip in. You need to treat this like you're building a schoolhouse, you're building a new police station or a new sewer system. This isn't just an ERP system. It's not a new version of Microsoft Word that you're installing. And that's the fallacy some clients and prospects fall into also, right? We'll just do it. This can't be that difficult. The vendor said they can have it done in 3 months. And our job is to educate people on what that 3 months mean for the next 30 months if you fall for that quick implementation without doing the hard work.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You guys have talked about processes, and oftentimes ERP zombies involve outdated, inefficient processes that refuse to die. Right? Can you guys give an example or two of a process that maybe took 17 steps and now takes 3 steps, and what were some of the resistance, from employees during those times in trying to redefine those business processes?
Yeah, my favorite, and I know Tyler, you've got yours. My favorite is the county we helped, that their purchasing process took a couple of weeks. Meaning, I need a box of pencils, and I've talked about this example. A box of pencils. I write down a paper form requisition. It goes to my manager. They sign off on it or not if they refuse my box of pencils. And then it goes to their manager, then it goes to their manager, and it eventually, I'm exaggerating, but it ends up at the mayor's desk, and he or she signs it. And this whole thing has taken 2 weeks. My box of pencils now costs 2 times as much, right? Or I haven't done work because I don't have pencils. So this process was all paper. They would send inner office mailers in brown envelopes where people ran them around. So think of all of the wasted time, paper, and resources in doing this process. With the modern ERP implementation, that came down to about, I mean, it could be instant if people were always at their desks and looking at requisitions. But in a realistic way, it came down to a couple of days, right? With me putting in the requisition, having the approval set in, and if it's under a certain threshold, it goes through the process. Um, that saved them so much time. But the resistance came from people saying, if I'm the guy or gal running this envelope, that's my only job. I run around between county buildings and pass requisitions to the people that need to have them next. That person's out of a job, or can they be reassigned to something more productive, right? Um, we talk about in economics, hidden employment, unemployment is a thing where people are busy, they have jobs, whereas this is a job that can be automated and reassigned and done better with more resources or different resources. So that was the resistance part. What are we going to do? How are we going to have transparency in this process? If I can't look at your requisition in my hand, the biggest thing that came out of that also was the whole budgeting process, right? We've had a few clients or prospects recently talk about how they need to redesign their budgeting process. And what used to happen on Excel sheets and paper now happens on a mobile phone or a desktop or a laptop. And in the example of the purchase order, you can now, the system was checking budgets for you. It didn't have to go all the way to the finance director for them to tell you, you can't afford this box of pencils. If you're putting in a requisition and you're out of budget for office supplies, it won't get to the next level. So those kind of things were very beneficial, but also you can imagine how much of a change management effect that had on people that their jobs were to produce this paper for the last 20, 30 years or forever.
Yeah. Yeah. I think of a client where we were working with their public works department, helping them with their work order management process. And, we show up day one to take a look at, what the current state is and ask them, where are the work orders living currently? And they open this giant journal to show, where all of the work orders are tracked.
Yeah.
And they love doing it that way. They've been doing it for 20 years. It works. Why are we changing it? And we were able to, with our knowledge of more sophisticated work order management systems, we were able to show them a better way, and get that biggest naysayer on board. And he ultimately that trickled down to his staff, who all ended up coming on board as well. So I mean, that's really the kind of stuff that I love to see, and that I think makes these things really exciting and really positive.
I love both of those examples. Thank you guys for sharing. We do have a question in the chat Ashish says, with zombie projects, typically what has been a better approach? Focus to revive them or cut losses and start with a new project as part of another program? Great question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ashish. I think keeping them focused is important. Um, I mean, to revive a project, it doesn't take a lot, right? I mean, you have to stay in touch with the client. You have to let them know that this is a difficult time for them. We understand because it's cutting into our revenue also. We when we do business with clients and their projects go zombie, that means less billable time for us. We can't hit our milestones, and that puts a strain on everybody. So the easy thing would be to cut our losses and run, but we don't typically. We will stay in touch. We'll stay engaged. It's not like we're going on site and spending money to um, go ask the question again on when they expect this project to come alive again. But it's not difficult to make a phone call or send an email a couple times a week just to say we're here for you. And that's the most important part, right? It's not when are you going to start the project and when can we start billing you again. It's we're here for you. We understand the difficult time you're going through, and let's keep talking and tell us what we can do to revive your project. Or we'll take ideas to them saying, hey, here's how you can do this again. Here's a different product we just saw at this conference you might want to look at. And all of this is, we're not, again, we're not on the billable hour telling them these things. But really it's deep from our heart saying we're all in this together and let's keep talking.
Yeah. Yeah. Cutting our losses is never that's never the first plan. That's never what we want to do. We always advocate, especially if a lot of time and resources have already been put into it. We understand if they need to take, a year to, get their organization structure a little bit better. But now we always are advocating for the revival of the project. And we hate to see instances where it becomes an emergency. We've had one instance where the project was derailed, and we continued to have monthly check-ins with this client, and then finally one day they reached out and said, our legacy system, the whole reason we went through this process anyway to get off this legacy system, that system is failing. And so now, instead of us being able to take our time and go through the process in the organic way that we proposed, now we're rushing to put something else in place, where that's never the pressure that we want to have to get one of these back up and running.
All right. How important is relationship building when we're talking about these failed projects? I mean, even with leadership changing, like how important is it for us to maintain that relationship and massage that relationship and do whatever we can to get in there and revive that vision for these new leadership stakeholders in the project?
It's the most important thing, really,
Yeah.
because it doesn't matter who the people are. The need for the organization is constant, right? And the people that are suffering are the people at the very bottom rungs, right? These are the people that are actually doing the requisition approvals. They're doing the purchase orders. They're the ones doing the work orders in a giant book. So leadership needs to, of course, they need time. When it's new, when it's a new administration, they need the time. They need the information. They don't know who to trust. So we always strive to become that partner in the long run, right? Who can you call, and who has some deep knowledge about the organization that we can show you the way and then revive this project again. It is about the project, but also it's so much more, because that project fits strategically with this new mayor's or city manager's tenure at the city or county. It's a huge part of why they're there and how it's going to shape their legacy going forward. So we're pretty good at having those discussions and building those relationships.
Yes, I would even go as far as to say that's what sets us apart here at Avero, is that we truly care about the client and the individuals and what they're going through, because this is a big change, right? Mackenzie brings up a great point, and I want to dive into timeline illusions because I feel like we get this question or this topic comes up all the time. The vendor says we can implement in 4 months, and whatever the organization may be, whether I have 18,000 vouchers because I run a housing agency, or whether I have 60,000 employees and I'm working for a city. Vendors typically tend to be the same, and they're like, we can implement in 6 months. So Mackenzie asks, how do you manage stakeholder illusions when they perceive the project timeline as a mere witching hour that can be magically shortened? I love how she put that question. It's a great question. I think we could spend hours just on timeline. So whoever wants to dive into that.
Yeah. We obviously they want to get it up and running as soon as possible. All we can do is use our experience with each particular vendor to say if that is realistic or not. And a lot of times, there are compromises. If you want to go as quickly as possible, there are going to be compromises. A lot of these implementations take up a lot of staff time. So they're having to do work on the implementation in addition to their day job. That their daily responsibilities don't lessen when these implementations start up. So there's all sorts of obstacles that we run into when we talk about timeline. And I've never seen one go completely perfect. I'm still hoping for that perfect implementation one day where we set a timeline in the beginning and then a year and a half later everything's up and running. But there are all sorts of obstacles that we run into.
Yeah, and timeline, time is relative. What does that mean? What it means for a salesperson to go live doesn't mean the same thing for the organization, right? Are you live when all of the lights in your data center blink green instead of red? That's what live means to a vendor, probably. But to the CFO, can we cut payroll checks? Can we pay our vendors? Can we do, electronic invoicing? Can I do this one particular report that my state asked me to do? All of those things are live to the customer. That's what it means to the customer. So be very careful of, we can get it done in 3 months. Of course, you can get it done in 3 months. And my client use it in 3 months. So we had a negotiating discussion with a vendor a couple of weeks ago with a large police department and this records management system. And again, these zombies plague not just ERP solutions, right? This is a police department records management system, and the vendor's promising a 3-month turnaround, and the PD's IT person saying, "Yeah, I don't see why it can't be done in 3 months." Meanwhile, the vendor's telling them, "Yeah, we'll do data conversion after go live. We'll do training after go live." And we're like, "That's not go live. That's just you installing the system and calling it go live. If it can't be used, it's not go live. If it doesn't have the one integration or the report that the PD needs that you promised to do after go live, then what are you doing in 3 months?" So those kind of discussions need to be had up front during negotiation. But again, define your own go live timelines, define your own definition of what go live means to you, and it can't be just one thing, right? If you're doing big bang or a phased rollout, there are multiple sub go lives that need to happen in a testing scenario before you let the ERP or RMS out into the wild so that your people can use it. And by the way, in that PD, the biggest change, I'm sure they could have implemented it in 3 months, but the biggest change would have been these patrol officers are doing work on non-connected laptops, or they don't have the right hardware. They may not have, they're doing things on carbon paper and typewriters. So taking them to a modern AI-based RMS, yes, you can go live, Mr. or Miss Vendor, but can the client go live in 3 months?
Right. And I think a lot of times, these leaders are blinded by the fact that they still have their day jobs to do.
Mhm.
And this implementation all of a sudden becomes a second day job. It's like they forget that they have their everyday tasks. And then on top of that, the implementation tasks, right, from the vendor.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good point to note, that the day jobs don't disappear, when you're going through an implementation. So
yeah, and again, this I would liken it to building a new police station, a new justice center, a new school. You wouldn't do that on your own. You'd have consultants and architects and people that are doing this on that you can rely on to see the project through. So
right.
we're starting to see that shift slowly, but it's happening.
Yeah, as we wrap up today, I have one more topic I want to dive into, and that's the curse of customization, right? ERP projects often stumble when organizations over customize, right? So, Tyler, can you share an experience maybe where the quest for customization turned an ERP project into a zombie?
Yeah, I mean it happens all the time, but we want these systems to completely match our processes. Um, what I think is overlooked sometimes during this is like this is a time to optimize in many different ways. This is a time to optimize policy, internal workflows and operations outside of the system. This is a time to have those conversations as well. If you are implementing a system and they're demonstrating a process and it doesn't look exactly like the way you do it now, um, take a look at it, consider it. Would this be better? Would this work for us? Can we do this? A lot of times, sometimes changes need to go and be brought to council or need to be brought to, the executive team. But we've definitely seen instances where they want it a very, very specific way. The system cannot do it, and then we're spending time delaying that timeline again. There's just there's effects that trickle down all across the project if you need it to work a very certain way that it isn't possible.
Yeah, and good point, Tyler, because some of these things might need um, regulation changes, ordinances. Again, talking to another client yesterday, we were going through their HCM processes, human capital management, HR payroll, and recruiting came up, and they're still under some old civil service rules. So no matter what you want on the shiny new HR system you're trying to buy as a new HR director, you may have to deal with the council and ordinances and what the people actually want and how this works. So those are the nuances that really come to light when you do a thing like business process mapping and redesign, right? You visualize these things and look for things that might be impediments to getting you to your vision. Not impossible, but if you don't know exactly what it is, you can't go to the mayor and say, need an ordinance change or need this to change a little bit here so we can implement this solution, which seems to be the best practice. So on and so forth.
Yeah, well, thank you guys. As we wrap up today, I want everyone to remember your ERP implementation does not have to be a horror story. With the right knowledge and the approach, you can steer clear of the undead and achieve success, and Avero can help. So with that being said, if you guys have any questions or comments, or if we didn't get to your questions or comments today, please reach out to us on all social media platforms. We're available at all times. Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, AV, for sharing your wisdom with us. And to all of our viewers, may your ERP projects be filled with treats and avoid tricks. So happy Halloween, everyone. Catch us next week on our live. We will have a very special guest. And we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.